The mansion was worth more than most people could imagine. 20 bedrooms, 3 kitchens, a private theater, a garage filled with luxury cars. And that morning, a young woman named Emily Carter walked through its golden front doors carrying nothing but a cheap cleaning bag and a prayer. She had come there because she needed a job. She had no idea that before sunset, she would stand face to face with a billionaire who had everything money could buy. Except peace. And she certainly didn't know that the one thing she was about to do inside that mansion would completely change both of their lives. Because sometimes, God sends you somewhere for one reason, only to reveal he had a completely different plan. Emily Carter was 28 years old and lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. Her life had never been easy. She worked wherever she could find work, cleaning houses, washing dishes, helping elderly neighbors, and occasionally taking babysitting jobs. But that week had been different. Emily had received a notice from her landlord. She had 7 days to pay the rent. She had $17 in her checking account. Her refrigerator was almost empty. And the only job interview she had managed to get was for a private housekeeping position at one of the most expensive homes in the city. That morning, Emily stood outside the enormous iron gates of the Harrington estate. She looked up. The mansion seemed to disappear into the clouds. She whispered, "God, I don't know why you brought me here, but if this door is meant for me, please open it." Then she pressed the intercom. A voice answered, "Who is this?" "Emily Carter. I'm here for the housekeeping position." There was a pause, then the gate slowly opened. Emily took a deep breath. She had no idea she was walking into the most important day of her life. The owner of the mansion was Alexander Harrington. At 38, Alexander was one of America's youngest self-made billionaires. He owned technology companies, real estate, hotels, and investment firms. His face appeared on magazine covers. Politicians wanted his attention. Business leaders wanted his approval. People fought for 5 minutes of his time. But inside his mansion, Alexander lived like a prisoner. He had stopped trusting people years ago. His former fiancée had left him after discovering that his wealth was much greater than she imagined. His business partner had betrayed him. Even people he considered friends eventually asked him for money. So Alexander created rules. No unnecessary conversations, no personal questions, no guests, and absolutely no emotional attachments. When Emily entered the house, Alexander was standing at the bottom of the staircase in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He looked at her cleaning uniform, then at her worn shoes. "You're late." Emily looked at the clock. She was actually 5 minutes early, but she simply smiled. "I'm sorry, sir." Alexander frowned. "You don't argue." "No, sir." "Why?" Emily shrugged. "Because arguing doesn't make a job easier." For the first time that morning, Alexander almost smiled. Almost. Alexander handed Emily a list. It contained more than 20 rooms. Kitchen, dining room, library. Guest rooms, upstairs hallways. Emily looked at the list. "Is there anything else?" "Yes." Alexander pointed toward the west wing. "Don't go there." Emily nodded. "Okay." "And don't ask why." She nodded again. "Okay." Alexander turned to leave. Then Emily noticed something. His expression changed when he looked toward the west hallway. It wasn't anger, it was pain. She didn't ask. She simply started working. For the next 4 hours, Emily cleaned every room. But she noticed something unusual. The mansion was beautiful, yet it felt empty. Family portraits covered the walls, but there wasn't a single family member living there. There were expensive toys in one room, a child's piano, a small red bicycle, a framed photograph of a little girl. Emily stopped. She stared at the photograph. A little girl with bright eyes was standing beside a younger Alexander. Emily's heart sank. She whispered, "I'm sorry." Then she heard footsteps. Alexander stood behind her. "What are you doing in here?" Emily turned around. "I was cleaning." "I told you not to come into this room." "I know. Then why did you?" Emily looked at the photograph. "I saw her." Alexander's face went cold. "Leave." Emily immediately stepped back. But before she walked out, she quietly said, "She looks happy." Alexander froze. No one had spoken about that photograph in years. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. Emily's words kept repeating in his mind. "She looks happy." The little girl in the photograph was his younger sister, Sophia. Sophia had died 12 years earlier after a sudden illness. She had been only 9. After her death, Alexander blamed himself. He had been away on a business trip when she became sick. He never forgave himself for not being there. So he kept her room exactly as she had left it, and he never allowed anyone inside. The next morning, Emily arrived early, but when she entered the kitchen, she found Alexander sitting alone at the table. There was coffee in front of him. He wasn't drinking it. Emily quietly started preparing breakfast. Alexander looked up. "You don't have to do that." "I know. Then why are you?" "Because you haven't eaten." He stared at her. "How do you know?" "You've been sitting there for 20 minutes. Alexander looked away. Emily placed a plate in front of him. "Sometimes people don't need advice." She smiled. "Sometimes they just need someone to notice." Alexander didn't respond. But for the first time in years, he ate breakfast with someone sitting across from him. 3 weeks passed. Emily continued working at the mansion. She never asked Alexander about his money. She never asked about his cars. She never asked for favors, and that confused him. One afternoon, Alexander received a phone call. His company was facing a massive legal problem. A major investor had discovered financial irregularities connected to one of his executives. Alexander's entire business empire was suddenly at risk. He stormed into the mansion. Emily was cleaning the library. She looked at him. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." He wasn't. His hands were shaking. Emily noticed. "Sir." "I said I'm fine." He slammed a folder onto the table. Emily stepped back. Then Alexander sat down. For the first time, Emily saw the billionaire completely break. He covered his face with his hands. "I built everything," he whispered, "and I might lose all of it." Emily stood silently. Then she said something he never expected. "Maybe losing something isn't always the same as being destroyed." Alexander looked at her. "What does that mean?" Emily took a breath. "My grandmother used to tell me, when God closes a door, don't spend your whole life staring at it. Look for the door he is opening." Alexander laughed bitterly. "You believe God is involved in all this?" Emily nodded. "I do." "And where was God when my sister died?" The room became silent. Emily didn't try to give him a perfect answer. She simply said, "I don't know." Alexander looked surprised. "But I know this," Emily continued. "You're still here. And maybe your story isn't over." Chapter 6, The Thing SHE Found. The next morning, Emily was cleaning the west hallway. A storm had damaged part of the ceiling. Water had leaked into an old storage room. Emily entered to clean it. Behind several boxes, she discovered an old wooden cabinet. Inside was a stack of documents. One envelope caught her attention. It had Alexander's name on it. Emily didn't open it. Instead, she took it to Alexander. "Sir, I found this." Alexander opened the envelope. His face changed. Inside was a letter from his late father. Alexander had never seen it. The letter explained that his father had secretly created a charitable foundation in Sophia's name. But after his father's death, the foundation had been forgotten during a complicated legal transition. The final line of the letter read, "If you're reading this, Alex, I hope you understand that your sister's life was never meant to end with her death. Let her love continue through you." Alexander's hands trembled. He sat down. Tears filled his eyes. Emily stood quietly nearby. Alexander looked at her. "You found this." Emily nodded. "I guess I did." "No." He looked toward the ceiling. "No, maybe God did." Alexander immediately contacted his attorneys. The foundation still existed, and the assets connected to it were worth nearly $40 million. But there was one condition. The money had to be used to help children and families facing serious hardship. Alexander could have taken the money back through a complicated legal process. Instead, he made a different decision. He called Emily into his office. "I want you to help me." Emily looked confused. "Help you with what?" "The foundation." She laughed. "Sir, I clean houses." "I know. I don't know anything about running a foundation." "I don't either." Emily smiled. "You're a billionaire." Alexander leaned back. "And you're the first person in years who has made me want to become a better man." Emily didn't know what to say. Alexander continued, "I want to build something that would make my sister proud." Emily nodded. "Then let's do it." Over the next year, everything changed. The empty mansion became a place of life. Alexander opened part of the estate for charity events. The foundation began helping struggling families. They paid medical bills, provided meals, funded scholarships, and created housing assistance programs. Emily became the foundation's community director, but something else changed too. Alexander changed. He started smiling. He started calling his mother. He started visiting Sophia's grave. And every Sunday morning, Emily would sit quietly in the mansion's small chapel. One Sunday, Alexander walked in. He sat beside her. "I never understood why you prayed," he said. Emily smiled. "You don't have to understand everything before you believe." Alexander looked down. "I've spent my whole life trying to control everything. And I failed." Emily smiled. "Maybe that's where faith begins." Alexander looked toward the window. Sunlight filled the room, for the first time since his sister's death. He felt peace, but their story wasn't finished. One evening, Alexander received an offer. A major corporation wanted to buy his entire company. The deal would make him even richer. But the buyer planned to shut down several community programs connected to Alexander's foundation. Alexander had to choose money or purpose. Everyone around him told him to accept. His lawyers said it was the smartest business decision of his life. His advisors said he could rebuild the charity later. But Alexander remembered Emily's words. "Maybe your story isn't over." He rejected the offer. The media called him foolish. Investors questioned him. His stock value dropped. For several months, Alexander lost billions on paper, but the foundation continued, and something unexpected happened. Thousands of people who had benefited from his programs began sharing their stories. One mother wrote, "You didn't just help my family, you gave my children a future." Another wrote, "My son is alive because your foundation paid for his treatment." Alexander read every message and finally understood. He hadn't lost billions. He had gained something money could never buy, a purpose. He had gained something money could never buy, a purpose. 2 years after Emily first walked through the mansion gates, Alexander invited her to the same front entrance. The house looked completely different now. Children were laughing in the garden. Families were arriving for a charity celebration. And the old empty mansion was filled with life. Alexander handed Emily a small box. She opened it. Inside was a key. Emily looked confused. "What is this?" Alexander smiled. "The foundation's new community center." He paused. "I want you to run it." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Alexander, you came here looking for a cleaning job." He smiled. "But I think God brought you here for something much bigger." Emily looked around, then she looked up. The same woman who had once stood outside the mansion with $17 in her bank account was now standing in the middle of a foundation helping thousands of people. She whispered, "I asked God to open one door." Alexander smiled. He opened an entire mansion. They both laughed. That evening, Emily returned to the small apartment where she had once worried about paying rent. But this time, she wasn't going home to fear. She was going home to peace. She opened an old notebook. On the first page, she had written a prayer from the morning she interviewed for the job. She read it again. "God, if you brought me here, please show me why." Emily closed her eyes, then smiled. She finally understood. She hadn't walked into that mansion because she was meant to clean it. She had walked into that mansion because someone inside needed healing. And while she thought she was there to change the billionaire's life, God had changed hers too. Sometimes the door you desperately want isn't the door God intends to open. Sometimes you think you're going somewhere to survive, when God is actually sending you there to change lives. Emily went to the mansion looking for a paycheck. She found a purpose. Alexander thought he had everything. He discovered he needed faith, forgiveness, and a reason to live, and perhaps that's the lesson. You may not understand why God is taking you through a certain door today, but keep walking. Because the place you think is only a temporary stop may be the exact place where your life is about to change forever. If this story touched your heart, remember, your story isn't over yet. And if you believe God still has a plan for your life, don't give up. The next door may already be opening.